You guys, welcome back to the Inner Beauty Code. I am so excited about today's guest. Her name is Sari Terrusa. She is a psychotherapist and an anxiety and trauma specialist. She is the founder of the Transformational Studies Institute in Jupiter, Florida, and is in the Mind Body Institute that has been serving the community for 30 years. Sari, welcome to the Inner Beauty Code. Can you tell us more about yourself and what you do?
Yes, it's so good to see you, Rachel.
So good to see you.
My office here is right by the ocean in beautiful Jupiter, and here I help people with anxiety, and I have different ways and different programs. I have an anxiety breakthrough program that is 6 modules. So by the end of that, anxiety is gone. I have an online class from people all over the world, and that our class helps to teach somatic tools. I'm a somatic experiential therapist, and what that means is we use the body as our code to what's going on with anxiety and trauma. And so it's mind, body, emotion, and spirit. And those are the parts of a person that have to be looked at in order to heal a chronic condition like anxiety or trauma. We have to work on all 4 levels, and we use experiences that speak louder than concepts in the conscious mind or words. I've been doing this work for 30 years, and the tools for anxiety have definitely gotten more refined with more research behind them.
Amazing. And so let's start with what is anxiety exactly? Because I know maybe it's difficult to put into words, but I know a lot of people suffer with anxiety or have anxiousness. So, can you tell us more about what exactly anxiety is?
Yes, and anxiety is neurological and genetic. So there's a nature part of it and a nurture part of how you were brought up. If you had anxious parents, then you got a lot of modeling about anxiety. And so anxiety is a reaction to the world around you in a very heightened or exaggerated way. We say anxious people catastrophize and exaggerate. That's one of the characteristics. If you want to know if you have anxiety, you can take one of the question either online or I can send you this. But we notice on the questions there are mind, the way your mind works, and the way your body works. So the mind is getting used to predicting the worst case scenario. That's what we call a what if. When your mind is doing a lot of what ifs, what if the roof falls in? What if I go outside and I get hit by a car? It's usually the worst thing you can think of. The body responds with an anxious reaction because you're telling the body there's danger. Your heart might beat faster. These are some of the body reactions. Your skin feels warm or hot. Maybe you have trouble falling asleep, or you feel trapped, like you want to run away. You might avoid people or situations, feeling out of control. These are all symptoms of anxiety, but actually, we can learn how to control our anxiety by using the body to relax and calm it down, and also learning how to choose consciously our thoughts. So in my anxiety class, we have a rule: no what ifs. We're not allowed to predict the worst and scare ourselves. So there have to be ways that we discipline our mind and what we're willing to listen to and become a part of. The opposite of anxiety is safety. So we want the body to feel safe. We have a way to look at the mind. If you put your hand up, this is the brainstem. fight or flight response is down here in the primitive brain. This, the emotional brain, with those what ifs that scare you. This, the frontal lobes, or the genius brain, we call it with the kid. The problem is this thing here, the amygdala. It's always going off like a car alarm that's saying, danger, danger. But really, there's just wind out there and the alarm went off. There's real no danger. So we have to have tools that we think of and strategize to keep that amygdala quiet. We say, don't flip your lid. Don't let that danger sign come out. The amygdala is the part of our brain, very, very primitive, that sees a stick on the ground and says, snake. There's a snake, danger. So it makes you jump or react. That's another sign of anxiety is hypervigilance, looking around and looking always for the danger.
I want to talk a little bit about the nervous system. That's something that I'm super interested in and I know is a major part of dealing with anxiety. And can you just explain that to us and the polyvagal theory and all the things that are going on and reactions in our body, or I guess causes in a way that cause anxiety or are the reason why you get anxious in the first place, or how it works within your system, in your nervous system, and how to calm that down?
Well, there's a statistic that anxious people are highly sensitive people. And the highly sensitive person has a little bit different reactions to things. And because they're hyper aware, maybe very intuitive. And so with the highly sensitive person, we have to look at their vagal nerve function. The vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the body, it vagus means wanderer. It literally starts up here in the brain, comes down by your cheek, down into the throat, controls the swallowing and throat reflex, down into your chest, your lungs and heart, your diaphragm, and down into the gut area. So it can cause stomach aches. A lot of anxious people have stomach aches, headaches, sore throats. These are areas, and heart, that get hit with anxiety. So we need to help this vagus nerve to break when it needs to break. That means to stop, but then to reopen again. And the vagus nerve kind of pumps like this. And so we have many techniques that can affect the vagus nerve and bring immediate relaxation. The breathing techniques, even humming inside your ear, can call the vagus nerve to stop its reaction. We have many vestibular techniques that we do to help the vagus nerve. Would you like to try one, Rachel?
Sure, Sari. Yes, let's do it.
Okay, everyone can do this. Now, you if you turn your head to the right, this is a really quick one. You'll see how far you can go. There's a restriction there. And then bring your head back. Notice the restriction and then go to the left. All right, now we're going to move our eyes. The eye movement really affects the vagus nerve in the brain. We're going to move our eyes for 30 seconds to the right and just move both of your eyes to the right for 30 seconds. Let's begin. Ready? Hold your eyes as far as you can see. 30 seconds can be a little longer than you think. But right now, we're affecting the vagus nerve in our brain by really holding our eyes to the right. And we're going to take a deep breath. Ready? And let it out. Bring your head back now to the center. And we're going to go off to the left with our eyes. Keep your head straight. Just go off to the left. Hold your eyes all the way to the corner. This bilateral stimulation of the brain can affect the vagus nerve and relax it greatly. Holding those eyes all the way to the left, and now taking a breath Come back to the center. Now, here's our experiment. Turn your head to the right and see how far you can go. Rachel, is it further than you could go before?
I believe it is actually.
And now go to the left.
Okay.
Those muscles just relaxed that come from
Wow.
here and where we hold tension in our neck and shoulders. So if you do this before you go to bed, it's a way to tell the whole body and the vagus nerve to relax. There are many tricks like this that you can do to trick the vagus nerve and to stop that alarm system that says danger. And these strategies are your genius brain that can control the body. Anxious people, it's a terrible disorder. There's generalized anxiety disorder, which is general anxiety. There's OCD, which is um, a more specific obsessive compulsive disorder. There's social anxiety, which is anxiety in groups. So there's many ways that this anxiety can express itself. So in my class, we go over how to help social anxiety because that can limit your interactions, wanting to connect with people, feeling comfortable around people can be very disabling. There's test anxiety. Well, there's anxiety for specific things like phobias, where you can't ride in elevators, or you might have a phobia of heights. That's all part of anxiety disorder.
Wow, that was so helpful. I'm gonna try to remember to do that now before I go to bed. Yes, so I was gonna say, definitely when you were talking about social anxiety just now, I totally remember that there are times when I would have social anxiety in certain situations, and through working with you or whatever you had told me to do, I think we talked a lot about the inner child healing, which I wanna get to next as part of anxiety. But,
Yeah.
I remember, like, I've talked about it before on my podcast, but just how I would get so nervous sometimes going to even something like a dinner with people that I didn't know, or meet, like, being at a dinner and the majority of the people I don't know, I would get a lot of anxiety for some reason, and then working with you really helped me, and I've actually, like, taught other people some things that you've taught me, um about talking to the inner child. So, I guess because it's kind of under the umbrella of anxiety, doing the inner child work as well, can we go over that? Because I know before I started working with you or learning more about how to do inner child healing, I would think it was really sounded really crazy to do inner child healing, or just really didn't fully understand it, or wasn't really taught how to do it, because there's so many people online that have all these programs for inner child healing and these visualizations and all the things that I don't think were really helpful. So maybe we can go over what is inner child healing, and what does that mean, and how does it affect you? Yeah.
Well, the reason that inner child work is so powerful is it changes your self talk. So, internal family system work that I do, IFS, talks about the different parts of you. And some of these parts, they aren't the real you, the aware self, or the adult, powerful you. They're parts that get exaggerated. And so the inner critic is a part that can really beat us up. Now, the inner child part is often exiled or put away because the child part of us holds all the feelings. So we want to bring that child part back because your feelings are your healing. If you know what you're feeling, you can tell the truth about how you feel. Thoughts and feelings are different. So we want to call forth this part of us And if you think about it as a child, it's your unconscious, or 80% of your mind is imprinted from birth or even conception on. Everything is remembered in the body, or that book, The Body Keeps the Score, right? So we can really help healing with getting in touch with this scared part of us and nurturing it, self-soothing and self-regulating the child. So if we go
Which
back,
is
the child lives in our nervous system.
sorry, but that was what like exactly similar to what we were doing when we were soothing the vagus nerve and doing the eye movement is part of the self-soothing if in case no one knows someone doesn't know what that means.
Yeah, self-soothing. But now we need to take that wounded child. Most of us were wounded as children because we weren't seen, heard, understood. But we understand that part of us that's trapped in our body, our nervous system, that's still acting out the beliefs like, I'm not good enough, I'm not wanted, I don't deserve love. It must be my fault. I have to give up myself to be loved. These are deep-seated patterns that can show up in adulthood. So we have to know where they started and how. And that's the importance of going back in time and looking at the wounds of the inner child. Now, why do we want to keep this part of ourselves if it's full of all these imprints from the past? Because the child also holds our spontaneity, our creativity, our intuition, our love, our joy. It's a wonderful spirited part of you that can bring back um, this life force that we all need, this creativity that we all need. So it's a beautiful part, but it has a shadow. Now, for the shadow part of the child, we need to talk to the child and reassure the child by using feelings. So when you're having a strong feeling, that's your child. When two people are in their inner child, when they're in their child and they fight, those are the two children fighting. So as a couple counselor, I see the children of the couple fighting for power and control. And we need the two adults in the room to negotiate and settle what's going on. So when you can put the child aside or next to you, the inner child doesn't contaminate your life with those beliefs. But we have to do it through love and nurturing, not through suppression. Most people are pushing down these feelings and this child all the time instead of listening to yourself. There are only four feelings: happy, sad, angry, and scared. All the other feelings go under that, like lonely would be under sad, frustrated under anger. But a lot of us as children were only allowed to be happy. We've kind of think of those other feelings as dark feelings, but they're not. All feelings are equal if you know how to work with them. So we have to give the child permission to feel and to hear what they're feeling. So that's the first step of talking to the child. We have a technology that's a very novel way to talk to the child so they'll listen. The brain loves novelty. The first step is listen to the child. The second step, to all the feelings, we list all of them and talk to the child. Second step is turn the child toward you, because now you love this child. You're going to bring this child to a place where they feel safe. Remember, that's the opposite of anxiety. You're going to explain it to the child. But the third step, very important, is take action. Children don't believe words. So we tell the child, your job is to play and have fun only. My job is to lead you, because I understand this gray area of relationships. The child's very confused and might lead you down paths you don't want to go. So Once we get a hold of the child and we're loving that part of ourselves and understanding our deep imprints and maybe wounds, we feel more whole. And that whole aware self and internal family system can start to orchestrate all these parts and have a beautiful, harmonious wholeness that brings deep peace. Did that explain it?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, we've talked about you've taught me how to speak to the inner child even when I at first was kind of just like not that I was against it, I just didn't utilize it, I guess. And then I started to use this technique a bit like when I would get anxious or like if I was going into a dinner, you would tell me it didn't happen all the time, but I definitely notice a difference. I don't feel anxious anymore when I get into social settings like I used to. However, yeah, I you just telling me to leave the child, telling my little girl that she can't come into this party, that I'm the adult and I'm gonna do it. And I really felt crazy doing it, but eventually your mind starts to understand it and not really feel silly when you do it.
Yes, it does take practice. And I remember working with a huge football player, professional, and he was a linebacker and he had to go after the front line there. And he had a hesitation. And we realized it was his child that had been beat up in gangs and really harassed. People would come at him when he was little. So when those people come at him, he had a just no one would know, just a little second hesitation. So we put his child on the sidelines after we talked to him and said, "We know you're scared. You don't have to do this." And he became so much better at his job as a football player. So that's just one example of how we want to separate the child, but then keep them very close to us.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is I really love the topic of relationships and I somehow always find my way to it in podcast because whether it's a romantic or intimate relationship or a work relationship or your family, we have to interact with people all day long in life. And it's always requiring us to navigate these different personalities and navigate through everyone else's wounded child that you're actually interacting with. So I think it's a really useful tool in just understanding the different voices that are going on in your head or the different parts of you that are making you react the way that you do to whatever situation might present itself, and I found that really helpful. The other thing so when talking about this in relationship, if you don't mind, how do, like, these wounds or these parts of us prevent us from being able to be in a relationship? Because I've talked to men about this on my podcast and talked about this with men about relationships and why people don't wanna be in a relationship, and ultimately, I really think for a lot of people, it's that they're afraid to be in a relationship. So maybe you have some examples of how these things play out in relationships when your internal family systems are not working harmoniously together, or maybe how you wanna get into attachment. I don't know if
Well, it does make sense in relationships to know how your child feels in relationship. So you as the adult might be all gung ho, and the child is scared to love, to be vulnerable, to attach. You might have avoidant attachment, which is when they get too close, the child backs up. She's scared. Or insecure attachment, always trying to cling or get something in the relationship. And then there's secure attachment where there's more safety. So people with anxiety disorder are difficult partners sometimes because they see every situation as a danger or they're anxious about it. And they usually want the child wants the partner to soothe them, to make them feel better. Like, why aren't you making me feel better? But no one understands your child like you do. This relationship is first. You have to soothe yourself and your child. You understand what your child has been through. But then the child also could be imprinted the wrong way and attracting the wrong person. I had a group of abused women, and their main belief in their unconscious was men hurt me. And we actually go out unconsciously and try to prove these beliefs. So the child might be attracted to someone like her father who did hurt her. So that's where the adult would make sure the child is safe. And when you get attracted in a trauma bond with someone like your childhood, it can be very scary. And these women tried to prove this over and over. This one woman I visited in the hospital, she had been beat up by her boyfriend. And when I walked in the room, she said, "Sari, now do you see and understand that men hurt me?" She was trying to prove that, she was always going to get hurt. And I said, no, it's what you believe and what you're attracting from what happened to you, from the wounds that make you bring this in to repeat it, to try to clear this relationship. And that's where the trauma work comes in. If you have unresolved trauma, you're going to be more anxious. If you have a situation that you're still reliving with PTSD or being easily triggered, the EMDR, the eye movement desensitization retraining, can really create space for safety. So we have to clear this child of these beliefs so we don't keep reliving them, and prove to her that it is safe to love, it's safe to be loved, and it's safe to speak what you need in a relationship. So if you find yourself replaying what happened to you as a child, you know there's some trauma work to do and some disconnecting from the past. So the eye movement is bilateral stimulation of the brain with moving your eyes back and forth, following a pattern. And the right brain, which holds this memory in PTSD, opens up, and the left brain, they come together and they can process it. So now you have space from that memory or that trauma. And it's very important to create this space in our life from the pain.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I don't know if I've spoken to you about this before. I know a lot of people, like I used to believe that going to a therapist or kind of working on these unresolved traumas will be more painful than just pretending, like you mentioned before, and stuffing down the feelings and pretending it doesn't exist. Or they think, oh, I don't have that big of a trauma, like I was never abused, and whatever the case might be, I don't have any major trauma, so I don't need to see a therapist. However, I think even if you don't and you see yourself maybe in relationships, for example, where you seem to be dating the same person in a different body, or continuing to experience the same thing at work, even maybe you never get the promotion that you want. And I think it's helpful to speak to someone like you if you start to recognize these patterns within yourself or find yourself unhappy in a situation and not sure how to break it, even if it's not a major trauma.
If you're a mind body therapist and know how to go inward to get these patterns released from the body, then you don't have to relive them. And that's what's important. When you're anxious, you could be a chronic worrier. And worry is the opposite of love. That can affect a relationship greatly, that you're always worried about your children or people. So any of these patterns, like what Rachel said, that you're finding are making you unhappy, can be cleared as long as you have someone that can hear what the pattern is by you telling what isn't feeling right. So your feelings are very important, and that's your child warning you something isn't right. We have dis-ease, unbalance, and techniques like breathing, meditation, and ways to go inward to connect to a peaceful place can really help anxiety. We need to take time every day to right ourselves in this kind of crazy world and find our center. Don't look for it out there. It's not there. You have to have this deep relationship with yourself, which is the ultimate relationship to a higher power. And all that lines up, we call it alignment, to bring more joy and happiness and peace.
Yes, I love that. And it's so helpful for people to hear this because I think, again, a lot of people are afraid to face themselves. And honestly, the amount of relief that you get after you face these little fears is so much greater than the little bit of pain it takes to actually look at yourself and admit when there's an issue or face your fears within yourself. I can attest to that myself. And yeah, it's just the techniques that you've taught me have been super helpful. And not to get into specifics, but even just how I used to view myself in relationships. And I told you one of the reasons why I started this podcast is because working with so many women in the beauty industry and seeing that there's so many similarities about the way that people feel about themselves, no matter what they look like or what they do, it's really helpful to just work on this.
Well, as women, we have to go against society's view of what we've been told, that we have to look perfect in order to be loved. And when we don't
Mhm.
see our own beauty, it's very hard to accept compliments or accept other people seeing us as beautiful. So, this inner beauty, what your podcast is about, is so important because inside each person is just a whole beautiful person. We have to experience that for ourselves first before we look for it out here. So, a lot of anxious people look for people to tell them they're safe, tell them they're beautiful, so they don't get anxious. But when we're always looking for that acknowledgement, it it becomes difficult. We don't always get that acknowledgement. But if we can acknowledge ourselves, that's what's important. So the mind wants to be reprogrammed. It's just ready and willing to accept the programming you give it. And that's where not just affirmations, but deep feeling in the body, the heart and mind coherence is very important that these connect. A lot of people have this body mind split. Their mind says one thing and their body's like, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I can't do that. And has the fear. When we get these connected, when we get an idea, like I remember you said, I'm going to move to London. And first you were very scared of it. You had to work through those different what ifs. But then there was a point where that body and mind connected, and it's like time to go. You were ready, and you've overcome a lot, Rachel, to be such a important model for women for the inner beauty.
Yes, and thanks to your help, I can definitely say I think we all look at I mean, maybe not everyone does this, but I certainly look at myself and do a lot of self-reflection and just over the years since I was even in high school and younger, just how much I've changed. I'm still the same, but have changed a lot and just the way that I think through different phases of my life. I'm so happy that I've done this work on myself because I don't think that I would have been as brave and I guess outgoing enough to be able to go after what I want in life and make these changes. And I know a lot of people struggle with that. Like I said, I talked to tons of women, so it's easier to do the work on yourself and go through like I said, the little struggle that you have to get to the other side of a problem than to just live the same story repeating for 20 years and be unhappy with yourself or, for your entire life, whatever time it may be.
Yeah, part of us knows we have to evolve. It's why we're here on this planet, is to evolve to the highest level. And so that's natural to want to feel better, and it's your birthright to have peace. So to strive for that is very important. I see in my women's group, often we feel alone, that we're the only ones experiencing this. And then I see the support the women give each other, that we understand each other and how we can get stuck. And we always say the anxiety bully will bully you until you know how to say no. The OCD monster will control you until you learn how to say no. I had a little 5-year-old who has debilitating OCD, and she got stuck in washing her hands. And we drew the OCD monster telling her, if you don't wash your hands, you're going to get sick. And she could really see how that voice, that part of her, wasn't in reality. It wasn't true. And so she put that up on her mirror, say no to the OCD monster. So now she's down to 10 instead of 20 washings. She's down to 10 and feeling less anxious. And then we're going to start moving down. But these sticky thoughts, we call them, these things we need to do, we think we need to do to survive, can trap us in some very difficult moments. The other thing about that you might relate to with anxiety is called intrusive thoughts. And these are very interesting. They're thoughts that pop in. They're usually about something you really care about, and they can freeze you in the flight, or freeze. They feel real in the moment. A woman that was very involved in her church had the intrusive thought that she's going to stand up and start swearing and just embarrass herself, and everyone will know. And this got so debilitating, she couldn't even go to church. But it was just a thought that really hit her because she cared about it. So if you get that thought when you're driving on the bridge, I could just pull over and fall off this bridge, and it freezes you. That's an intrusive thought. So we have a tool called Name It to Tame It. So when you know what thought you're having, like, that's an intrusive thought, I'm not going there, because a thought is like a door. And if you open the door, you're going to go down it. So we say, don't invite your thoughts to tea. They might be outside the door knocking. Don't invite them in and sit down and think about this with some tea. It's going to scare you.
Yeah, that was super helpful. Yes, I definitely find myself having a lot of intrusive thoughts often and realizing that you don't have to get on board with those intrusive thoughts is really helpful as well. But I still do I still have that problem sometimes, but I want to ask you about one more thing because I know we talked a lot about women, but I want to see, do men and women have the same kind of anxieties and thought patterns? And I know we touched a little bit on relationships and love, but wanted to talk about just in your experience with counseling couples and what are some of the struggles that you've seen a lot that couples deal with, and kind of maybe a few things off the top of your head where you have discord, or like you said, the power struggles and dynamic.
The problem is if you didn't get what you needed as a child, which is unconditional love, that fills us up. Most of us got conditional love, which is, I love you when you're doing what I want, so pay attention to you. But when you're not doing what I want, I won't talk to you or I won't love you. Now that depletes a child because the child needs to know that they're loved no matter what they do. We don't use love, which a lot of couples do, as power and control. So the child in you wants attention and love from this person. And that can be, you can look needy or clingy, or a person could stand back and just refuse to be compassionate and loving because they feel that you're taking advantage of them or they think they're not appreciated. So these patterns get set up with the two inner children. Now, one way out of this is to be seen and heard in a relationship. So first you're seen, then you're heard, then you feel loved. That's how it goes. So couples forget this. So I have a technique called an intentional dialogue, which we can learn easily. And it's a different than we usually talk because the brain loves novelty again. You're following a structure that's very safe because couples get into those fighting and arguments, those screaming arguments. In this intentional dialogue, we stay in our frontal lobes. We don't go down here and start screaming. If you scream from the brainstem, you're going to say horrible things. So we always calm down first. In this intentional dialogue, first there's a speaker and then there's a listener. So you get to say with this format I feel blank, and you put a feeling in there when you blank. So it might be, I feel frustrated when you look at your phone when I'm talking to you. Then the person, instead of being defensive, I don't do that. No, I never did that. Or, well, everybody does that, or whatever the defense is, they would say, I hear you feel frustrated when I look at my phone. And then the person is still speaking. They might say, yes, and I feel frustrated. Then you don't even look at me when I'm talking to you. You're always doing something. And they realize, Dean, that's what my mother did. She was always washing the dishes or doing something when I was trying to talk. I never knew if she was listening. You realize it's a trigger right there. So then you can make agreements and you ask the person, would you be willing? And they're very specific that when I'm talking, you put down your phone and you look at me. That might sound simple and easy, but if it's a habit, you have to consciously agree to that. If you agree, then you need to make the effort. If the person forgets, you can have like a signal, like instead of yelling at them, like, uh-oh, or you can say agreement. So we can make agreements. Now, an agreement is a win-win, a compromise, a lose-lose. So we want to make agreements where both parties see the value of it. They're not just saying, oh, okay, I'll do it. They see the value for themselves to set that boundary. Then the other person gets to talk and say what they feel and be heard, seen, and feel loved. I teach families this is when someone says, and I feel, everybody has to listen, stop, because they're saying something very important. Most people are feeling emotionally illiterate. They don't know their feeling words. They don't know how to talk about feelings. And most people, the other thing I teach is how to be in your body. Most people are just dissociated and like kind of out there somewhere. That's why they can't repeat it. So we have to be in our body and know what we're feeling so we can communicate that feeling to the other person without blame. No one makes you feel anything. You just feel it because it's already within you.
If more people, I swear, Sari, I hope so many people listen to this. I wish I knew this technique sooner in my life. And if this was taught to us as kids in school, there would be way less conflict in the world, I believe.
Yes, they do teach this in conscious discipline schools. The children learn how to say the I feel, and the other child learns how to repeat it, and it's then the argument's over. Because we have to have compassion. Compassion is our highest brain function. To have compassion for another is to listen and then feel empathy, what they're feeling, be able to understand. Sympathy is, oh, you poor thing, victim. Empathy is feeling and understanding you've been in that situation. You know what that feels like. It is important to teach your children.
Oh, I completely agree. And was a good reminder. I need to remember this in my own interactions with a certain someone in my life and many people, I'm sure. But Sari, I think that you gave us such helpful, useful information. I think that we talked about so much that I don't want to keep you too long and wear you out talking about all this stuff. And I know there's so much more we could get into. Thank you so much for being a guest today. Where can people find you if they wanted to on social media or online?
Thank you for inviting me, Rachel. This is important information, and I love sharing it. I am on Instagram, and I give an anxiety tool weekly, so you could practice these vagus nerve tools, and it's transformational.therapist. Also, I'm on Facebook with my institute, Transformational Studies Institute. My website is tsijupiter.com. So you can see some of the things we do. Next week, I'm leaving to teach a spiritual retreat in New Mexico with my fellow teacher, Alfreda Beartrack, who's a Native American medicine woman. And so we're so excited to bring 25 people with us to New Mexico and do more of this work, this internal family systems, learn about the sacred ceremonies, and be able to purify ourselves and get connected to the earth. That's very important.
That sounds amazing. Well, thank you again, Sari, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you.